Your phone already knows more about you than most people ever will. If you think it's just cookies, location tracking, chat logs, shopping habits, and every website you've ever visited feeding endless corporate and government databases, well, that's just the beginning, because right now, governments and some of the biggest companies on Earth are building something far more dangerous: backdoors into the devices you spend hours using every single day, including the one you're probably watching this on. Mark never thought it could happen to him. He was already dealing with one of a parent's worst nightmares. His infant son was getting sick. In February 2021, the San Francisco stay-at-home dad noticed his boy was experiencing painful swelling in his groin, so he did what every responsible father would do: get in contact with a medical professional. He'd never expect that doing the right thing could put his whole life in jeopardy. The COVID-19 pandemic was in full swing at the time, when even leaving the house could be dangerous, especially to the very old and the very young. They would need to send evidence of the illness to the advice nurse to schedule an appointment for a video consultation. Mark grabbed his Android phone and took some pictures of the affected area so he and his wife could send them to the nurse. It was the right decision, because using the images, the nurse was able to easily diagnose the infection and prescribed an antibiotic. But Mark was about to deal with a far worse infection. In taking and sharing those photos, he'd attracted the attention of the supposedly world-class AI system that big tech uses to catch some of the most monstrous people in the world, creators and distributors of online child abuse material. And in the eyes of this system, a man who was just trying to help his son was actually another one of those truly despicable criminals. And that decision was about to throw his life into chaos. Programs that large companies like Google and Apple use to stop monsters are peering into your private digital photo library. Mark found this out the hard way. Loyalty didn't matter. Mark was in many ways one of Google's best customers. Not only was he a lifelong Android devotee since the phones became available, he backed up all of his data and photos on Google Cloud. He synced his Google Calendar with his wife and had a phone plan with Google Fi. So when Google turned on him, it really was like the ground opening up beneath his feet and swallowing him whole. 2 days after taking the photos, he received a notification from Google saying that his account was closed due to harmful content. It was, quote, a severe violation of Google's policies and might be illegal. And here is the first cruel twist. Mark immediately realized what was happening because he'd once worked as a software engineer for a company producing automated content moderation tools. In his case, he believed it would be as simple as identifying and appealing to the human being inside the system who could exercise real judgment. The problem here was that there was no human. The system itself was his only judge. Google had also flagged a different video, and the case triggered a humiliating police investigation. Thankfully, after the stress of the probe, it was easy to prove to the cops that this had been a misunderstanding. He had the words of his wife, the nurse, and the paper trails of the treatment on his side. But it would not reinstate the account or any of his tools, and what did that mean in real terms? He lost years of photos, emails, contacts, records of his son's early life, his email address, and important business documentation. And thanks to Google Fi, he even lost his phone number and plan, despite having done nothing wrong. Mark would say of this whole nightmare scenario, "I knew that these companies were watching and that privacy is not what we would hope it to be, but I haven't done anything wrong." It's a freak case, a nightmare scenario, the kind of thing you'll think about every time you take or save a perfectly innocent photo. But this wasn't just an isolated case. Literally the exact same thing happened to a man identified as Cassio in Texas. Right down to the private parts infection and the photos texted to a concerned pediatrician. Cassio was in the process of buying a house, and having all of his Google accounts nuked almost ruined him and his family's chances of sealing the deal. These are real families, real lives, and real consequences, all in the hands of something that doesn't even have hands. Unthinking, unfeeling AI content algorithms hard-coded into the systems that we've all come to be so dependent on. In 2021, Google flagged over 600,000 cases and used this as evidence to annihilate 270,000 users. Are we to believe that all of those people are criminals? Or are we seeing a mass cull from overzealous systems designed to look like hammers and treat everything they see as a nail? And the cull is just getting started. In the UK, the tools to carry it out aren't just being hard-coded into phones, they're being hard-coded into the laws themselves. The UK has always been the spearhead of digital surveillance efforts in the English-speaking world. For proof of this, look no further than the Investigatory Powers Act of 2016, or as it was commonly nicknamed, the Snooper's Charter. It gave the British police and intelligence services sweeping powers to violate the communication privacy of their citizens. in the classic style, trading privacy and liberty for the promises of safety and security. In terms of more specific provisions, they empower the authorities to intercept certain communications, collect mass communication data, and to bulk intercept communications. Americans will probably be getting a déjà vu for the actions of the NSA after hearing about the passing of the Patriot Act right about now. It also led to the creation of the Investigatory Powers Commission, requiring service providers to retain details of every site that a user had been on for at least a year. It gave law enforcement warrantless access to this data and reaffirmed the ability of these authorities to remove any encryption that private companies had placed on user data. Under these new laws, at least 48 different agencies can have warrantless access to the data. This ranges from different police forces and national security interests to even the Food Standards Agency and the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service Health and Social Care Trust. To say all of this was just controversial among free internet activists and government watchdog groups in the UK would be vastly understating it. Angelema, head of the World Wide Web Foundation, said, "Does the UK really want the dubious honor of introducing powers deemed too intrusive by all other major democracies, joining the likes of China and Russia in collecting everyone's browsing habits?" Article 19, an individual rights and freedoms group from the UK, went even further. They said that the law offers a template for authoritarian regimes and seriously undermines the right of its citizens to privacy and freedom of expression. And they were right, because the Chinese government would later use this British legislation to defend their own draconian internet control laws. It's not exactly great international company. It got so much worse on April 23, 2024. The British government argued that the bounty of data and metadata out there had grown by an order of magnitude since 2016, and that meant that the general public as well as the corporate sector were already able to access and take advantage of this data. Giving the government even more power to snoop into all of this data was simply a way of leveling the playing field against these so-called bad actors out there. If you're someone who believes that encryption and private companies will protect your information, then this legislative framework should, and frankly will, scare you. The biggest additions for the new 2024 amendment are two frightening details. One, the law would force technology companies, even ones based overseas, to keep the British government updated on any improvements to encryption, privacy, and security hardware and software. And two, when receiving this information, they'd have limitless power to order these companies to halt or alter these new developments so they could always have a backdoor into everyone's online data and communications. It's a kind of terrifying digital skeleton key, a one-way mirror that lets the UK government stare into anyone's devices without them ever knowing. And it might be happening right now. An open letter from 30 cybersecurity experts, cryptographers, and academics said that this whole thing could be an absolute disaster for overall security. They wrote these proposals would have disastrous consequences for the security of users by introducing bureaucratic hurdles that slow the development and deployment of security updates. Anyone with any knowledge in the field could tell them that they're wrong here, but that doesn't matter. Legislators are more oriented towards scrambling for power and control than taking things slow and listening to experts. If you think this starts and ends in the UK, then I'm afraid you're living in a fairy tale. You might think all these are just tools to track down criminals and terrorists, and you're safe and secure. After all, you haven't done anything wrong. But that's just what they want you to think. Now that the tracks have been put down to slow and sometimes even destroy encryption, the next question is how can they look at everyone's actual messages? And if you've been paying attention, you'll know that they already have an answer. The UK government isn't the all-powerful, world-dominating force that it was in the imperial era. There is no putting the power of end-to-end encryption and the security and privacy it provides back in the box. So instead, they took a different route, hiding the poison pill inside end-to-end encryption. If you've never had it explained to you in human terms before, end-to-end encryption means that when you send a message, the message is all scrambled or encrypted. No one but its intended recipient would be able to see it. The decryption key would only be in the recipient's hand, and the message would only be decoded when it's in this person's possession. It's a great system that will keep your secrets safe, unless there's a backdoor, like client-side scanning. It goes by many names, including local processing and endpoint filtering, but they all fundamentally mean the same thing. It creates a filter between the two ends of the encryption process. That filter is connected to a database that has a series of hashes. When a message or a file passes through, while the encrypted message isn't said to be read, it is checked against the hash databases of the client-side scanning software. If this filter deems the encrypted communication to contain objectionable or forbidden material, one of several things might happen. If you're lucky, on the most benign end, the filter will just stop the message from being sent. If you're unlucky, the message might be sent, but a copy of it will also be sent to the relevant third party, whether that is a corporate moderation team or the government imposing restrictions on it. No matter how narrow the focus of this filter, this is still a breach of security that could be crowbarred open as wide as a powerful enough entity likes. If the end-to-end encryption you've been promised contains client-side scanning, then the encryption is little more than a comforting lie. This little government black box is hiding inside far more of your favorite communication programs than you would ever feel comfortable knowing. There is no meaningful limit to what can be put in the collection of hashes. Some have suggested that you could easily put the whole dictionary into one of those databases, which would effectively make any message susceptible to easy decryption. Think of it like Dracula. He can't enter your house until he's been invited, but once he's been invited once, he can come and go as he pleases. And then you're in real trouble. In the days before the internet, would you still send mail if you knew that USPS was opening every single letter, every single package, just to find out and record what's waiting inside? Which brings us back to the privacy-destroying legislative experiments of the UK, such as the Online Safety Act of 2023. This is the law that keeps minors in the UK off of social media, and it has led likely to an incredible boost in the sales of VPNs across the nation. But it actually contains an even more sinister caveat than the intrusive age checks: a mandate for technology providers to include the exact kind of client-side scanning mechanisms we just described. At this point, it probably goes without saying that this is a terrible idea. Ciaran Martin, former chief executive of the UK National Cybersecurity Centre, said of this, "Client-side scanning, despite the claims of its proponents, does seem to involve some kind of level of access, some kind of ability to sort and scan. There is no way of confining that to good use by lawful, credible authorities and liberal democracies." It's not surprising that ComputerWeekly.com has declared privacy will be under unprecedented attack in 2026. The UK seems to just be the warning shot before the full onslaught. The worst part is that all these nightmarish new policies are almost impossible to argue against for one big reason. You're not against child safety online, are you? It's the vague notion of child safety that's been employed to prop up campaigns as baloney as the original 1980s satanic panic against rock music to more modern attempts to paint games from Pokemon to GTA as horrors that'll turn kids into cold-blooded murderers. And the reason it keeps being used is that it almost always works, purely because of the fact that it looks really, really bad if you argue against proposals that aim to prevent child abuse and even terrorism. But is this technology actually really stopping criminals and terrorists, or is it just making things easier for governments across the world to oppress people whose speech they don't like? Starting in 2023, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children saw a sharp rise in reports thanks to the increasing role of automated technological systems in reporting sinister behavior online. 36.2 million reports! Sadly, while some of that is actually material being made by truly awful people, it is worth remembering that people like Mark and Cassio from earlier would have been included in a tally like this. And this is a problem that cuts both ways. Not only is it horrible for the people who get falsely accused, but all these false positives make it harder for the authorities to investigate actual culprits and save any victims involved. Anyone whose primary motivation was actually protecting children would be able to notice this glaring flaw in the system and work to create more specific tools. Well, unless protect the children is really just a smokescreen. And you inevitably have to ask, if they're not actually building the system to protect children, then what is the true purpose of these massive hidden surveillance machines? What the UK is doing is just the start. Obviously, restrictive systems like this have existed in Russia and China for about as long as the internet existed. But the UK were the real trailblazers for destroying digital privacy in the alleged liberal democracies of the Western world. Now the EU and the United States seems eager to follow that trail into a potentially even more extreme destination. The EU has been slowly but surely moving to take up a policy called CSAR, but it's more infamously known by its nickname, Chat Control. Now why might they call it something like that, huh? Of course, this policy would feature the same age verification traps that have been inconveniencing people across the UK and Australia, but they'd also take it just that little bit further, proposing that technological communication programs voluntarily scan all the messages of their users for forbidden content. When the government of a major economic zone strongly suggests that you voluntarily do something, it's a little like the mafia strongly encouraging you to voluntarily give them protection money every week. It is the kind of offer you can't refuse. Critics have said that the systems the EU wants to put into place are notoriously error-prone. While the legislation says that it'll only give the police access to data that the system flags as potentially dangerous, you realize by now that tuna nets catch plenty more than tuna. If you use an innocent word that's been plugged into the system as a terrorist code hash, police and intelligence agencies will have full legal access to all of your chats. Even if you're not doing anything illegal, do you really want them seeing all that? Let's say you go to the beach and you and your friends take a few photos in your swimwear. You're not the kind of person who posts stuff like that to social media. It'd make you feel a little self-conscious, but you still don't want to lose the memory. These photos sit there in your photo album, but if you're in the UK or the EU, or as you're about to find out, the US, something scary happens the next time your device backs up to the cloud. AI systems designed to scan photos for bodies and bare skin suddenly pick your photos out of the cloud. There might not even be any real consequences, you might not even know it happened, but they still got flagged. Somewhere, a content moderation team or a cybercrime division are looking at your swimsuit photos. That's pretty creepy, right? But it could get worse. Imagine you take an intimate selfie for a partner and it trips this same system. There's no clearer way to put this. A content moderation team or a group of anonymous government agents could be looking at your nudes. And it's totally legal, and there's nothing you can do about it. The American flavor of this is the Earn It Act, which stands for Eliminating Abusive and Rampant Neglect of Interactive Technologies Act of 2023. In essence, it's a reskin of all those other laws and regulations that we've seen popping up over the Western world. They want to establish a formal regulatory board that threatens to strip tech companies of their immunity if they don't follow the board's practices. This means that they can use the threat of legal coercion to force companies to break the encryption in your devices and look at your private photos and messages. It's preposterous. But when has anything being absurd ever stopped it from happening? And we all know where this leads. We all look back fondly on the days of the first smartphones, Fruit Ninja, iBeer, and the convenience of having a working computer in your pocket. But that thing you can't do without is soon going to be a double agent for the corporations and the feds. It'll become a gateway to an internet panopticon that will never stop looking. Want even more reasons to feel justifiably paranoid? Check out Somebody is Watching You Right Now. Or watch this instead.